Hey friends! Welcome to today's video. I am so excited to be sitting back here in the seat. It has been a good almost 2 weeks, I think, since I sat down to film my last video. I don't know, I felt like I just needed to take a little break last week and disconnect and kind of recharge my soul. And I did that and now I feel great. So I'm sitting here today. I want to film a few videos and I was thinking last night, what am I going to film? What am I going to film? And I'm going to film what I love to film. I'm going to film just videos all about tips and techniques and tricks and teaching makeup, because that's what I love to do. So I'm gonna film a complete makeup application, but I'm gonna break it up into a few videos so I can really focus on each part of the makeup application and just like throw as much like tips and tricks as I can at you. I did something like this last year. It was like the Focus Features series, and I went through the full makeup application process, and I think I put those videos out back to back for like a week. I'm not gonna be able to do that this time, but I am gonna get these videos sprinkled out one after the other. I'm just gonna share all my tips and tricks over each part of the process. So today we're gonna start with skin foundation. So there are so many different tips and tricks when it comes to foundation. I wanted to share my current foundation routine. My foundation changes probably like yours throughout the year, depending on the climate, depending on the weather. Our skin changes. Sometimes it's drier in the winter, more oily in the summer. That's definitely the case for me. And so I find that mixing certain products together to achieve a long wear foundation that gives you the coverage that you want, but doesn't look heavy or matte is kind of my goal. It's kind of what I strive to achieve when I apply my foundation and when I'm picking products. Now, as I've gotten older, my products have certainly changed. I used to look for full coverage, which is really funny because I didn't even need it then, but I thought, you know, the more flawless and full coverage, the better. Not the case anymore, because what I find is with full coverage throughout the day, it typically starts to look very heavy, if not immediately after application. But I do like a good fair amount of coverage. So I'm gonna share with you guys my routine. I also wanna say this, you know, foundation and skin is so personal and it needs to be customized. So please understand that what I'm sharing with you works for me. If you have different skin or different skin concerns than me, this might not work for you, but I'm gonna try and share tips and tricks that are pretty general that anyone can use in the application process. Okay, so enough rambling, let's go ahead and get started. I want to tell you what I prepped my skin with. Today I just put on my normal skincare routine. So my eye cream, my moisturizer, and my SPF is what is on the skin right now. Now today I'm going to be using one of my favorite long wear foundations. It's the DIOR Forever Matte is what it's the 24-hour high perfection skin caring foundation with sunscreen. This is one of my go-to long wear matte foundations because it has a very natural matte finish. It's not gonna look heavy, it doesn't look dry, it doesn't look flat on the skin, but it does eliminate shine, it does control oil, and it does stay in place. So I absolutely love this. However, I wanna mix it with a glowier primer, or I want to prep the skin with something that's going to add a slight bit of glow, a little bit of hydration, so that I'm not applying a matte foundation on dry skin. So the primer that I chose is the Laneige Glowy Makeup Serum. It's a hydrating and long-lasting makeup wear primer. This I picked up at the Sephora VIB sale last month. I don't really have a huge opinion on this yet. I've used it a couple of times. I like the combination of these two together. So yeah, I would say I like it. I would say I like it. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply this. I'm going to take the dropper and load it up, and I'm going to, I actually apply it on my fingers. I know sometimes we see people put it on the skin, but I actually like to apply it on my fingers. That way I can just kind of get a nice even application. And I always start in the center of my face with product, and I'm just gonna really work it into the skin. I want to make sure that this is really blended into the skin. Now, if you are someone that has texture on the skin that you like to minimize or, you know, not make so apparent, a primer that is a smoothing primer or a blurring primer might work really well for you. Pores are my biggest texture concern. They got better with that peel that I did last month or a few weeks ago. That definitely helped with the pore size. I noticed that certain foundations will magnify pores, and I find that this foundation does a really great job of blurring pores. So I don't feel the need to use a blurring pore primer with this foundation. If I were using a more dewy or glowy or radiant foundation, I would not use this primer, and I would use something that controlled oil and that blurred pores. Okay, so now that that's on the skin, it does have a slight kind of tacky, sticky feel. We are gonna go in with foundation. Now, I like to apply my foundation before I apply my concealer, and the reason that I do that is because a concealer is more concentrated in pigment. So it's kind of very similar to a foundation, right? It's complexion colored, it's meant to cover, but the difference between a concealer and a foundation really is that a concealer is supposed to be highly pigmented, highly more concentrated in coverage. Now, sometimes when you do your concealer first, what you will find is that you will use concealer in areas that you didn't really need to use it. You will start to put under eyes, then you'll go and conceal these blemishes that you might see on the face, where you might have gotten the coverage you need from your foundation alone, but now what you've done is you've put a concealer and then you go back in with a foundation on top of it, and now you have a layer of makeup that's thicker than it needs to be. And you know, when you're concerned about texture, wrinkles, fine lines, makeup looking heavy, the name of the game is to use very light little layers. Use as minimal makeup as possible. However, you will find that I use a lot of makeup. I love makeup. I use a lot of products. The name of the game is sheer little layers. You can use a lot of different products, but still little makeup. I know that sounds crazy, but you can. Okay, so I'm the shade 2.5N, so that stands for neutral. And I find that about a pump is good. I might have squirted a little bit of an extra there, but definitely not even a pump and a half. Maybe a pump and a quarter is what I applied. Now I'm gonna go in with my BK Beauty 106 foundation brush. These are just clean. I washed it last night. It's actually still a little damp. Whenever my brushes are damp, I kind of like to rub it in the palm of my hand just to break up any fibers that might be clumped together because they're damp or wet. Now, I wouldn't use a damp brush with a powder product, but I can use it on a liquid product. I'm just gonna go in, and I always like to start in the center of the face. I talk about this all the time, but start where you need the most coverage, okay? That's tip, is that number one? I think I've already listed a lot of tips, but this is tip number one. Start of where you need the most coverage. So for me, that's the center of the face. If you have discoloration around the perimeter of the face, melasma around the mouth, wherever you need the most coverage, start there. Apply your brush first there, because wherever you apply that brush first is where the most product is going to transfer to the skin. So you obviously want to start there. Now, when I apply my foundation, the one tip that's really great for getting good coverage but not getting heavy, cakey look is to just use a little bit. If you notice, I'm really just like slowly picking up product and applying it in very sheer layers. Take your time on your skin. You know, the skin, as I've gotten older, I've noticed that while I used to just slap it on and spend all this time on my eye makeup, now the time goes to my skin, because that, you know, that is where that extra time is really gonna make a difference. So if you notice, I'm pressing to get coverage, and then I'm buffing in little circles, and then I'm kind of like running the brush all across the face to shear it out. All of those techniques together are going to give you good coverage, but also blend it out and make it look natural on the skin. This foundation is so nice. You can see that everything is getting covered and even, but it still looks very lightweight. It's so beautiful. The finish of this, while it's matte, it is very natural. So again, it doesn't look powdered, it doesn't look dry. Now, I am kind of feeling, you guys, like this is enough coverage. I still have a fair amount of product on my hand, but you know, resist the urge to use up what you have just because you have it. If you don't need it, don't use it. I think that's another tip that I want to share, is that less is more. You know, less is more, especially as we get older and we have issues with texture, or we are concerned with our foundation looking heavy. Just because you pumped it out does not mean that you have to use it. All right, so I have a good amount of coverage. I've got a little brow product there. There we go. So I feel like this is a good amount of coverage. Everything looks even. Obviously, under the eyes need to be concealed. Now, because I'm using more of a fuller coverage foundation, I'm gonna use a concealer that is more on the natural side. I don't really like to use a full coverage concealer with a full coverage foundation. It's just too much. So the concealer that I'm using today is the Charlotte Tilbury Magic Away Concealer. This is more of a lighter weight concealer, in my opinion. Now I have the shade, I believe I have the shade 4 Fair, so it's lighter than my skin tone by quite a bit. So it's going to highlight the under eye area as well. Now I am gonna apply a little bit more. I'm not a fan of this packaging. I know I've shared that before, but it's kind of messy. So I'm going to apply that concealer right in the inner corner to brighten that area up. Okay, perfect. All right, so once I have a good amount of product applied under the eye, I'm gonna go in and blend it out. And I'm using the Sigma F79 concealer brush for this. Now when I'm blending out concealer, I really like to just press. You will not find me really swiping because that is shearing it out. It's eliminating the coverage. Pressing, you're going to get the most coverage while still blending it out. If I use a fuller coverage concealer, you'll find me use a beauty sponge to blend that out because that's going to absorb any excess product and make things look a little bit more natural. But because this concealer is more natural and light, I'm using a brush just so I get as much coverage as I can. That's so nice. Look at how beautiful that looks. Bright, concealed. I'm gonna run whatever's extra onto the lid. Okay, perfect. Now, you can also take a little bit of your concealer and go right around the nose. A lot of us will have redness around the nose, so doing this will kind of conceal that and brighten that as well. Perfect. Okay, so now we have a pretty natural but good coverage, flawless complexion. What I'm gonna do now is I wanna create a look that gives a pretty youthful glow to the skin, but also is long wearing. That's the name of the game for me because I live in Texas, it is so hot. And if I made everything dewy and glowy and beautiful, in an hour, I'm going to look sweaty and greasy and my makeup is going to be sliding off my skin. So I like to find a good balance of glow, but long wear. So the name of the game is, you know, setting your makeup and using the right products in the right areas. I'm gonna use a cream bronzer and a cream blush, and then I'm gonna set the foundation and the makeup with a powder in certain areas. I have been obsessed with this bronzer. This is by Fenty Beauty, and it is the bronzer Butter Biscuit. I believe this is a newer product. I even have the little thingy still on here. I love the color, I love the texture of this bronzer. It is so easy to blend out, even though it is a cream bronzer, it is so easy to work with. Now when I'm using cream bronzer or cream blush, I like to apply it before I use any powder to set any area of the face. So I'm gonna save my setting powder for after these steps. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm actually gonna use the same, no, you know what, we're gonna use the BK Beauty 107 brush. Sometimes I'll use the 106, but I'm gonna use the 107. I'm also gonna use this for blush. Now I'm just gonna kind of load up the tip of the brush, about like that, and I'm going to kind of press and then buff in little kind of circular motions. You can see that it just comes on the skin in a very natural finish. It's so easy to blend out. It's pretty foolproof. If you were intimidated by cream bronzer or cream blush, I find these products are pretty foolproof because they're buildable. They're not going to apply on the skin super heavy and then be hard to blend out. It's a nice formula because it's really creamy, but it also stays in place. I don't find that these like melt off the skin or get muddy or move a lot. Now my skin is pretty normal. It's not excessively dry, it's not excessively oily. In the summertime, it definitely does get oily in the T-zone. So it's pretty normal combo. But because of my climate, even if I had dry skin in Texas, you need long wear foundations because it just melts off. And then I'm gonna run it into my hairline. I like to really warm up the face, give some dimension to the face. All right, so that's given a little bit of warmth to the face. You can just kind of go back and add it where you want to the level that you like. I really like how the center of the face is brightened and the perimeter of the face is kind of bronze. It looks like a true kind of sun-tanned look. Then next I'm gonna go and apply the cream blush, and this is also by Fenty Beauty. This is Petal Poppin. It's part of her Cheeks Out cream blush collection. Also a new product, I love it. You could also use your 106 BK Beauty. I'm gonna use the 107 and I'm just gonna dip the tip in here. And when I'm applying cream blush, I like to smile. I like to press right on the apples of the cheek. And then when I'm blending out, I kind of like to pull down and back a little bit to lift the cheeks a little bit, but I don't want a harsh like streak like that. You know what I mean? So smile, find that apple of the cheek. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to the other side just so I use up what's on my brush on both sides. And I love this blush because you can see that it gives the slightest glow. It just lights up the skin. The color is buildable. You know, you're not gonna put it on and be like, oh gosh, that's way too much. You know, you can just build it. If you want more color, again, use that technique of pressing. If you go like this, you're really kind of shearing it out. So if you put too much color on, then you can shear it out that way. But if you're trying to build color, sometimes I have to watch myself because I will get a little carried away with blush. Oh, it's just so pretty though, so pretty. I've been wearing these two products with no foundation and just a tinted sunscreen lately, and it is so beautiful. Perfect, okay. All right, so there we go. So now I'm pretty dewy. Even though my foundation has a natural finish, you can see that the rest of the face looks pretty dewy because I applied those cream products. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and set the foundation and the makeup with a little powder. I'm using the LANCOME Long Time No Shine powder. I like this translucent powder because it is a blurring powder, so it will help minimize the appearance of pores or fine lines. So for under the eyes, I'm gonna take the BK Beauty 108. Now, I do set under the eyes with powder. I know that's kind of like some people are like, oh, it looks, you know, makes my under eye area look too dry. If you have dry under eye area and it's very textured, lots of fine lines, you know, I still would set it. I would just use a very, very, very minimal amount of powder because the issue that you'll run into, especially if you have a lot of fine lines or wrinkles under the eyes, is the concealer. The concealer is going to settle and move in those fine lines and wrinkles. So if you don't use a powder, you'll find that your concealer moves and settles and you have creases unless you use a longer wear matte concealer. But then the issue that you run into with that is that it's drying and it's more than likely going to be more coverage and it's going to make that area look heavier. So my best advice is to use a lighter weight, creamier concealer and then use the smallest amount of powder to set it. So what I've done is I've put the powder on my brush, but then I'm kind of blotting it on the lid. I really don't want much. And I'm just going to kind of press it under the eye. Not too much is needed there. Now I'm gonna stick with this brush because I'm only kind of powdering in certain areas. I'm gonna stick with this brush and I definitely want to powder the forehead because that gets shiny, and I want to powder this nose. I tend to get oily on my nose. And then I'm gonna powder around the mouth. Now, I'm gonna powder kind of around the cream products. I think you can put powder on cream products, you just have to be careful. Instead of using a dense, smaller brush, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna use a bigger brush, and I'm gonna use a very small amount of powder, you guys, not much at all. And I'm really working it into the lid so that I don't have much, and I'm just going to really lightly press. Lightly, that's it. Very lightly. I didn't run my brush back and forth. I don't want to mess up that cream blush. I worked so hard to get that natural light glow. I don't want to mess it up. So just enough to set it slightly. So that wraps up complexion. I do want to share a couple of other tips. If you do find that you apply your foundation, it's too heavy, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to take it off and restart, you can take a damp beauty sponge and just bounce it over the face, over the foundation, and that'll help absorb any excess product. It'll also help work it into the skin so it doesn't look like a heavy layer of makeup sitting on the skin, but it kind of becomes one with your skin. That is a really great way. If you apply your foundation and you feel like, oh, I've over powdered, my skin looks dry now, it looks flat, take a good setting powder that has a little bit of a glow to it, or a beauty water, and just mist the face. That'll help kind of create the look of what your foundation will look like if you had waited an hour or two and your natural oils had started to set the makeup. It'll give you a more natural look. So you can use a beauty water or a setting spray as well. Another tip, if you have oily skin and you want an extra layer to ensure the makeup doesn't move, is a setting spray. And I love the Urban Decay All Nighter. I'm actually gonna apply a little bit right now because my makeup has been a little oily lately, so I'm gonna do that just to kind of help set that. Another trick is if you feel like you've applied too much beauty water or a setting spray, just take your powder brush and blot it. Don't add any product to it, just take your powder brush and blot it, and that'll help absorb any excess and make everything look really natural. So I hope you guys found this video helpful and learned a tip or trick or two. If you did learn anything, I would love to hear down below in the comment section what you learned or picked up. Also, if you have a great foundation or concealer, blush, or bronzer tip or trick, leave it in the comment section below. I think that's a great place for us to all learn from each other. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up, but stay tuned because the next video will be all about eyes. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.